What's your intro going to be?
I don't know. We'll figure it out on the fly.
So we're going to look at it in the screen.
Yeah.
And we're going to say, hey guys, it is time to prep for the end of the year.
You want to take it?
Hey guys, it is time to prep for the end of the year. How did the year go by so fast? Is it because we're older?
People say that. I think there's like actually data to suggest that. I can't remember which podcast I was listening to, but it was talking about how how all of your experiences start to compound together. So it actually does like move faster. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know.
I really feel like it was just January at the start of this year and then going into the spring, summer, school started. Wow. And now
Dude, here we are. Like the holidays are here and it's about end of the year planning. But one of the best parts about it is you get a chance to level set and make sure that you are cognizant of the things that didn't go well, celebrate the things that did. Then set yourself up for success into the new year. So really, we're going to share today what we do, the way that we walk through our annual planning strategy to make sure that we're looking at all of the things that took place in our life and the things that we either want to double down on or the things that we need to remove so that we can be the most connected, spirit-filled, married couple that we can possibly be and really start creating a family that the legacy that we're truly trying to leave. Because for us, we got legacy wrong for so long. It was about the things that we could accumulate versus the culture that we created.
I was just going to say, this has been a topic that's been stressful over the years. Family planning, not for babies, but family planning, year-end planning. And sometimes it's usually one person that gets anxious and just wants to avoid and not talk about it, because there's probably going to be some things that I didn't do right. And so maybe if I'm bringing some anxiety to it, one person's like that, the other person's like, no, let's go. Like, let's level set, let's get into it. And that's usually you.
Yeah. And really for us, it starts with, it's not just a one-time event. For us, we look at it really daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then annually. So really when we think about the annual component of that, it's no different than the business world. There's so many aspects from business that translate into marriage. And I think it's good to look at both of those and say, okay, why does this work in business? And if it does, why wouldn't we use it in our marriage? And I think so many couples get that wrong. And for us, we've just made it a priority to say, okay, end of the year planning. Well, what do you do in a business end of the year planning meeting? You look at the things that went well. What quarters were the most effective quarters for you? Where did you see the most profitability or where did you see the most expense? You look at those and then you start to adjust your business for the next year. Same thing applies in marriage. Where were the areas where we saw the most profit in our marriage or we had the most margin in our marriage and we were able to connect on a deeper level than we ever did in any other season? Well, why wouldn't we double down on those areas?
It's smart. Yeah.
But the only way we can do that is if we're able to reflect on that past year. So that's really where we start. Number one thing is to reflect on the previous year. Where were the areas where you won? Where were the areas where you saw the connection really being something that was more than just passing one another by, but it was intimate moments that allowed you to succeed, whether it was for the next day, week, month, quarter, whatever it may have been. You've got to have that reflection period to look back and say, we won here, we didn't win here.
So when do you do that? Is it like, do you recommend couples say, hey, let's pick just a random Tuesday, 6 o'clock at dinner? No, like we need to plan it and have maybe a date night, an overstay, a staycation where you can have, some things prepared and you can honor both of each other's time and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think really, let's just take it directly from the business world again, because that's what we've done. Step away. Get out of the office, get out of the house, go somewhere where it's actually going to be a planning meeting where you're sitting down with one another.
With your calendars.
With your notebooks, with your journals, with all of the stuff that you need to make the most surgical decisions that you can make within your marriage, because it's important.
Yep.
So for us, we step out of the house, whether we go on a quick getaway or we send the kids to grandma and grandpa's, whatever we do, we take scheduled time to make sure that you and I are not distracted by everything else going on in life. And this is truly a planning meeting for us where we're going to throw up a vision board. We're going to write out our words, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. Most importantly, you've got to set aside that dedicated time. And this isn't just an hour conversation. So please hear that. This is actually an event. If we do it in business and it takes an entire day, here we have this marriage that we want to last a lifetime. To plan out your full vision for a new year is probably going to take more than an hour.
Yeah.
and we can't get frustrated with one another. You wouldn't sit in a business meeting yelling at your boss or another coworker about what they're bringing to the table, about the ideas that they have. You talk through them, and there'd be reason with it, and there'd be mutual respect with it. So it doesn't look that much different for us in the marriage. We want to put away that dedicated time to do it.
Couple of scriptures just to back it up. Proverbs 21:5 says, "Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts leads to poverty." Applying that to your marriage, to your family, to your year. Sometimes if you don't plan, you're planning to fail.
Correct.
Basically.
Yep.
And so that can be stressful for some people, but again, like just good planning is going to lead to prosperity. And maybe that prosperity isn't only in your finances, but prosperity with the strength of your relationship, the connection with your family. Next scripture is Proverbs 16:3, "Commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed."
Yeah.
So I would say even in the very beginning of this, pray about it, invite the Lord into it, and really go from there.
Yeah, another one that just comes to mind is where there's no vision, the people will perish. And you've got to cast vision.
Yeah.
And the most important thing with vision is having clear communication with it. What's it look like? The only way you're going to get that is when you guys come together and you get aligned on it, so that when you step out of the boardroom or whatever room you're in, when you step out of that environment and into the fight, into the reality of life, what vision are we using as our North Star to say we want to go forward? So important for us to have. So reflecting on your past, setting aside dedicated time to do it, making sure that you celebrate wins along the way, and discuss lessons that were learned throughout that year to make sure that you're not repeating some of those things if they were in the negative effect.
Yeah. Okay, number 2.
This is the most fun one because this is where we really get to dive into the main events of your life, right? How do you elevate the core areas of your life? For us, it's the 6 F's. We start with faith, we move to family, and then really goals for the upcoming year with our family. Then we move to, so it's faith, family, fitness, friends, finances, and then fun. We want to make sure that those 6 areas are in order for us. So it's always going to start with faith. We're going to pray before we go into this meeting. We're going to look at, okay, where are we at spiritually?
Yep.
Are we in the spot where we want to be? Typically, the answer to that is no, because we always want to continue to grow with the Lord. We want to grow deeper with Him. We want to get to know Him more. We want to go through that sanctification process. And that just takes, that's a journey, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So are the practices that we have instilled in our family, are they moving us forward on that path or not? Where were the times that we stepped away? So faith is the most important piece of that.
Yeah.
Are we aligned in the direction that we're headed on the spiritual side of things in order to put us in the best position to win the legacy that we're trying to create?
Yeah, and for the couples, I'll speak specifically to the wife. If your husband isn't there yet, if he's not leading you spiritually, that doesn't mean that you just fall apart and just don't do it. That's inaction, and it's not going to end well for you. There's seasons where maybe as the wife and as the mother, you need to take that lead and say, hey, if he's not going to go to church, if he's not going to lead me in that way, no problem. I'm not going to shame him, but I'm going to have that dedication. And so going into this, you may be not aligned, but just knowing, okay, where can I grow, even if it's not with our family specifically. And that's tough.
That is tough. And I think it goes both ways. I mean, we deal with so many couples where they're not aligned on this when they get married. That doesn't mean you can't get it right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you can't start over and really position yourself to say, okay, we're going to put that stake in the ground and we're going to move forward from here. So for the men that are out there and have this desire to grow spiritually, but probably are a little bit worried, anxious, feeling like they're going to be judged, don't know where to begin. This is a great time to have that conversation. Okay, here's where we're both at. Let's set the baseline today, and launching into this new year, let's make sure that we get alignment on this assignment and we can move forward. What are the things that we're going to instill in our family that are going to help us over the long haul, help us finish the race strong versus limping across that finish line? So faith is number 1. Second is family. What are the family events that we've created or that we've done well in this calendar year? And what are the areas that we want to make sure that we do moving into the new year, whatever year that is? Really, this starts with like big rocks. 1, spiritually, we're always going to start there. Secondly, we want to look at, are there any major events that we have? Are there vacations that we have to get planned out? Are there kids traveling events? So many people, school events. When are they off?
Right. Activities is a big one.
Pick the big rocks, the ones that you know, and get those on the calendar. I know some couples do like one vacation with the kids, one vacation alone each year.
Can we just stop right there? A vacation with the kids, it's really a trip.
Right.
That's
Fair.
what we started to say. A trip, when you go on a family vacation, sometimes it's just a trip.
Yeah.
If you're going on a couple's vacation, it's a time where you can kick back, relax, and rejuvenate.
Yep.
But anyway.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're building those into your calendar so that you know where they're at and talking about them. What's the budget going to be? What's it going to look like for us? Because in this whole area of this 6 Fs, you can really start to establish what's your spending going to look like in this new year. Budgeting is a big piece of this. You wouldn't go into that work meeting without talking about budget and how you're going to set yourself up or your business up to be profitable over the long haul. You don't just want to have these very cyclical years where like we won, we lost, we won, we lost, we won, we lost. No, let's do consistency and continue to level up. We want up into the right growth time after time after time, year after year after year. So we do that by really understanding these major 6 components for us: faith, family, talking about the big pieces of that. With family, you're going to want to talk about discipline. What does it look like for your kids? What seasons of life are they in right now? And what's upcoming in this calendar year? Sporting events. What are you going to enlist them in? What are you going to sign them up for? What's going on in your family that you're going to be more successful with if we're talking about these things together versus one spouse just having to take that role and responsibility on? And I think in a lot of marriages, especially if one spouse works and the other doesn't, the one that's working, these are kind of like things like, hey, this is your department. You deal with this. But then what happens is the other spouse gets upset. Well, you're signing them up for everything. You've got them in gymnastics. You've got them in taekwondo. You've got them in jiu-jitsu. You've got them in this. You've got them in that. We never have time for one another. Okay, this is your time to talk about, we didn't win last year in this area. I want to make sure that we do this year. How do we get alignment on that? And what are the big ones? Of course, there's going to be variables that get dumped into that, but plan out those big rocks with your family. Next one is fitness. That's a big piece of this for us. We really value the importance of fitness. There's
being physically fit, healthy mind, healthy body.
Yep. There's scripture about that, of taking care of the temple that God has given us. One of the hardest things, and if you think about all the way back to your marriage vows, it's in sickness and in health. But let's prepare ourselves on a fitness journey so that we're stewarding what God has given us in this amazing body, this amazing thing that we have to take care of, not just because we want to live healthy, longer lives with one another, but it's tough when a family member gets sick. And you can't avoid all of that, but regular fitness routines. And a lot of couples aren't aligned on that. We see this so frequently in infidelity. Usually there'll be one that really gets into their fitness. Their body starts to transform. They start
some
get some confidence about it. They're hanging out with a different group of people, and the other spouse is so busy, doesn't have anything going on, doesn't have time for that. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, how do we get here? All of a sudden you're not attracted to that person physically anymore. So we put a lot of importance on making sure that we have a dedicated fitness routine for us for a calendar year or for a season. This is what we're going to work on throughout this year. I'll say for us, we took the previous year, this current calendar year, 2024, to really make health a top priority for our family. All of us, me, you, all of our kids that are in the home, of getting blood work done, all of these things. But we didn't just fall here on accident. We looked at it last year and said, okay, let's make this year a year of health and fitness for our family.
Yeah, and that goes into expense and dedication too.
Yeah, and talking about that, knowing that, okay, we're about to go on a journey to get our health aligned. That's going to cost a lot up front, but it's going to save us money over the long haul. So blood work, all of those things, but you're talking about those. And it's not just one random day I wake up and say, okay, well, hey, I'm going to take my health and fitness serious this year or today. And do you want to come along with me or not? Well, okay, that's not going to be a great conversation. So really thinking about that from the standpoint of what are we going to invest into our fitness and our health so that we can make sure that we're living healthy lives with one another, staying attracted to one another, and really building the best long-term life that we can possibly build.
One thing that we've done, the last couple of years is joining the same gym.
Yeah.
And that's something that's worked well for us. We go to a CrossFit gym, shout out CrossFit Kinesis, but trying to find times where we can go to the same place, work out together, and have that consistency. You're a little bit more consistent in it than I am. However, still making it a priority. We've done it with our kids, our youngest one for sure. And then you're making some noise over there. Yeah,
sure.
That's a chair. Just having that's a dedicated time that we get to go together, and then set aside the time to talk about finances with it, because that's the next one.
No, friends.
Well, I skipped friends, but finances is tied into this, talking about faith for tithing, talking about, activities for our family, what our budget is for fitness this year, what can we do, what are we comfortable doing. Let's go back to friends.
Yeah, then looking at friends, we talk a lot about taking inventory of the people that we're around. It's really important for us, specifically because of the different seasons that we've gone through. It can be really challenging when you're looking at friends, and really what friends encompasses it or envelops all of this is anything outside of the house. Who are these outside sources that we go to? You've got some certain friends that you go to, female friends, but we've got alignment on who those people are. We've had seasons where maybe somebody
When you say certain friends, like my inner circle.
Yeah,
probably.
It's just like who we're going to call our close group of friends, right? Who we're going to trust things with that are important to us. We say it this way: if you're not for our marriage, you're against it. And that's no shame on the people on the outside, but we really want to surround ourselves with people that are fighting with us and for us, not against us.
People say, show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yeah. Yeah. Another great point of that. And so really taking inventory of, okay, who were the people that I was with in this calendar year that maybe weren't the best influences on me in some of the decisions that I made throughout my life? That's important.
On the contrary, who's going to build me up? Like, who did I really enjoy my time with? Sometimes with women, we tend to, I will say specifically with women, we don't tend to maybe, as we get older, go out with our friends that often, and it just looks differently or just looks different. And so if I'm not going to have a lot of opportunity because of the busyness of life, I want to make sure that when I go out with friends, I'm going to feel uplifted, come back energized, and not feel completely drained or even regretful for some of the things that I said or some of the things that I did. And that's on me, but I really want to be mindful with that.
Yeah. So this is the time to talk about that as a married couple, as spouses, and really sit down and say, okay, where are we at? What's our circle look like? What's your circle look like? Is there anything that we need to discuss about that circle that's going to make sure we're equipped for when we step into those environments where those people are going to be at, and what's that look like? And again, no shame on those people. We're not saying just kick them to the curb, but if they're not building you up and they're not making you better, you really do have to take inventory of say, okay, who are we around, and how do we make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with people that are better than us, further along than us, equipping us, setting us up for success. And then the same thing goes for us of who are we bringing along in that group as well. So love those conversations with you about your friends and where my friends are at.
Yeah.
That takes us into finances, because finances is a big piece of marriage.
I don't like this one.
Yeah. This is one where I'll probably do a majority of the talking, only because Bree doesn't like, for years, if you just gave me a budget, I would know.
Don't
so guess
give
what?
me a budget.
Gave her a
like
budget
it.
and the budget got blown out. So regardless, it's something that
Can we be honest though? The budget right now is specifically at our grocery store.
Gosh, no kidding.
Like going out to eat, but that's just besides the point.
The price of everything right now is absolutely insane, and the grocery store is the one that is just atrocious. But
And I go there 5 times a week.
You got to keep me fed. So finances is a very important topic, and this is a time to look back on the calendar year, go through the credit card statement, go through the bank accounts, go through all of the bills that you have. Reoccurring subscriptions is one that can sneak up on you.
That's so true.
What a great time of the year to look at it and say, okay, what all are we paying for this year, and what can we cut out? What are the areas where we can move money over to here so that we're in a position to give more? We're in a position to either with our tithe, if we're not there already, or the offering or the alm, where we want to give more and help other people out, because that's extremely important for us as Christians. We want to make sure that we're able to fill each of those buckets. And we haven't always gotten that right.
No.
We're terrible sometimes about looking at finances together. And usually it's Bree handles all of the in-home finances and I handle all of the business finances. So bringing those two together is somewhat tough for us at times, but we've really got to sit down with consistency to talk about that. And we're getting ready to hit that time of the year where we're going to go through the full calendar year and look at all of our expenses and say, man, where did we blow it this year, and where did we do well, and what do we need to do to set ourselves up for success so that we can build out some liquidity over the long haul.
One tip for parents is to invite your teenage kids along this ride for a little bit of it and talk about where they're spending money on Apple Pay. That was one thing that
snuck up on us.
Snuck up. And it wasn't that our kids were doing anything really nefarious. It was just like going with the flow. We're busy. And so sometimes our credit card bill has been more because of what they've done and just random purchases that we've participated in that we really didn't need. But invite your kids into it a little bit. Have some grace, have some patience, and really readjust or reevaluate that.
And with how easy it is to order off online right now, I mean, you can
Shout out Amazon.
Yeah, shout out to Amazon. He's probably been here 3 times today already. But you've really got to look at those things, right? And say, okay, are we spending our money wisely? Are we being good stewards of the resources God has given us? Are we tithing? Where are we at? What's our goals? How do we want to make sure that we set ourselves up for success for the long haul? And then last but not least, for the F is fun. Like, make this fun. This should be an event where you guys are excited about it. You're getting ready to cast vision. You're launching a new business with one another every single year because that's what you've been handed. You've been handed these resources from God, and it's like, okay, where are we going to spend these resources in the right way? And how are we going to make sure that we stay connected? And how are we going to make sure that our fitness goals are still aligned? So you're really creating all of the goals around these 6 Fs and have fun with it. And then also, where are you going to spend money on fun? Like, don't just... So many people want to save everything, save everything, save everything. You've got to use your money to make memories. One of our guests on a recent podcast, that's where I heard that from. One of my favorite lines is, use your money to make memories. It's going to last far more than accumulating things. But you've got to make sure that you have that money in the bank. And the only way you're going to do that is if you really look at your budget and plan it for the full calendar year, so that you know that any extra resource that God provides, use that to go out and have some fun after you've tithed.
Yeah, so this is an area, again, where we have fallen short, but implementing some of these things can help plan the 6 Fs: faith goals, family, fitness, friends, finances, and fun.
Yep. Moves us into making sure that we've got number 3, shared goals for the new year on really each of these. So really, as we're thinking through this, everything else is really going to line up with these 6 Fs. What are our individual goals? So an exercise for you would be to write these out and really talk about where you're at today and where you want to move forward in these areas, or what are the things that you can do if you were able to move forward. So we'll provide a worksheet for you to be able to look through this and walk through it. It'll be in the link below where you'll be able to grab this worksheet and walk through this exercise and putting goals with each one of them individually and then also collectively. Really important that it's, because we've got different goals in these areas, and that's okay. But what's the alignment going to be when we bring them back together, and how are we going to hold one another accountable? How are we going to walk with one another? How are we going to support the other person when maybe their goals are a little bit different than ours, but ultimately they're all still coming back to that North Star of like, hey, these are the family goals. These are the most important ones. Let's focus on this. And then I've got this subset over here of where I want to make sure I'm really excelling in these areas, which Bree alluded to. I've taken my health very seriously in 2024. So my consistency with that has been rain or shine, in sickness and in health. I've tried to show up at the gym knowing that recovery is an important piece, but there's certain components to my day that look different than Bree's in this area. And what does she do? She doesn't judge me. She doesn't tell me that I'm offline or I'm not focused on the family. She knows that we set this out early in the year. I was going to make my health and fitness a priority in 2024. So we've got alignment on it before we get there.
Yeah, and sometimes that's every week that we can kind of talk about too.
Absolutely. Yeah, because stuff changes, right?
Yep.
This isn't
Having
to be
grace for each other.
A rigid schedule to where you're stuck on it, right? We're coming back. We're talking about it. Remember, I said at the onset, it's a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly conversation. We've written the business plan, or you're getting ready to write the business plan. But when things are off in that business in any calendar year, you're going to come back and look at it from a quarterly standpoint or a monthly standpoint. Say, wait a minute, little bit too much spending here, or a little bit too much saving here, not in the financial world, but just the levers that you can pull. Too much investment here. Therefore, let's dial it back a little bit and let's go ahead and make sure that we're attributing those resources in the right area.
One thing that I think is super important is realizing that God's gifted me with strengths and I have some weaknesses.
Yep.
God's gifted you with strengths and you have some weaknesses. Going into this together is going to take a lot of grace, a lot of patience and humility. Shaming is the last thing you want to do. And so just dial it back a little bit. That's one thing that you and I talk about is you're very passionate with specific things and I'm very passionate with different specific things. And so we have to come together, use our strengths, but be full of grace throughout too.
Yeah, grace, patience. And remember, if this is the first time you've ever thought about this in your marriage, that's okay. You're not going to get it perfect the first time, but being able to come back to it and say, okay, we created this vision for the year based on these areas. We want to make sure that we're successful. Excuse me. We want to make sure that we're successful how we set it up. So come back and look at that vision for the full year and say, hey, I'm out of alignment here. Let's get realigned when we go through it. And that's really number 4 is creating this vision board. The way that we do this is we really get out our journals. We get out everything that we've got for the full year. We talked about credit card statements, everything, and we just scatter it out on the table and then create this whiteboard of like, okay, here's the areas where we feel like we can win. Look for those common threads throughout of like time, resources, energy, wins, losses, and start to build that common thread and say, okay, we're seeing this a lot. That's great. Now you're starting to get it all out there. Then once it's all out there, come back and say, okay, let's make sure that finance is number 1. Let's make sure health is in here. Let's make sure faith is number 1. Faith is always going to be number 1 for us, but let's make sure that we're aligned on that. Really creating this vision board and set a theme for the year of what that's going to look like for you. This is one of our favorite areas. This is where we really talk about what are the words that we want to use in our family this year. We challenge each of our kids and us, pick a word of the year. What's that going to be?
What's your word? Yeah.
Yeah. What's your word? Again, for our practices, let's get biblical with it. Okay, what is God revealing to me of an area that I need to grow in? For last year, it was accelerate for me. It was like, we've got to accelerate. I'm still praying into what that word's going to be for this year, but look for scripture that aligns with that. And if it's from the Lord, he's going to bless that. And we challenge every person in our family to really come up with your word of the year. This is a time for you to come up with that theme for the year for your family as well, of what is your theme going to be for this year? Is it going to be peace? Is it going to be joy? Whatever you want of like, this is going to be the year of growth for our family. This is going to be the year of daily discipline for our family. This is where you guys are talking about that collectively so that you can be successful and hold one another accountable with it and encourage one another with it.
One thing with the vision, as you're planning a lot of kids' activities, like when those are going to be scattered throughout the year. If you have multiple kids about the same age in a ton of select sports, that's going to eat up a ton of your time, a ton of your resources, and really there's opportunity for disconnection. I talk to women all the time when we are discussing, what's your connection points with your husband? And for lack of better words, it's not there.
Yeah.
Like you're so busy doing all the things for the kids. And so really taking stock in what do we want our kids to do? Do they need to be in 1 or 2 select sports every season? Is it for the year? But really be mindful because it doesn't have to just eat up your time and resources. Talk about it.
Yeah. Keep moving into that planning piece of like planning the practical steps. And that's really what number 5 is. This is where we're starting. We've casted this vision out now. We know what it's going to look like. Where's the accountability piece come into play with that? And you've got to look at, okay, this is when we're going to schedule these meetings with one another. Put those onto the calendar right now. Get them out there. Okay, Sunday nights is going to be the night where we're going to sit down for 45 minutes and walk through the upcoming week. Great. What's the weekly meeting look like? Or excuse me, that would be what's the daily meeting? Let's start with daily. What's the daily meeting look like for us? We talk about soul care. How could I have shown you more love? How could I have shown you more respect? Where'd we win today? Is there anything I could have done different? Is there anywhere that you need my help? That's one piece for the daily. Then the weekly is like, okay, Sunday nights, this is where we're going to plan out our upcoming week. Put those onto the calendar now. Put your monthly meeting onto the calendar every 3rd Thursday, every 3rd Sunday. And the duration of these is really, if you look at dailies, about a 5 to 15 minute conversation.
Yeah, that's good because you don't always have time every day to sit down and talk about everything.
Yeah, especially with how busy everybody is. You just don't, right? The reality of it is we don't. So we can either go through life and just let it hit us in the face, or we can grow through it by putting proper planning into place. So the daily's 5 to 15. The weekly is 45 minutes to an hour. The monthly could either be a full day, half day, whatever that looks like for you guys, as long as it's ample amount of time for you to be able to accomplish what you want to have. Then your quarterly meeting might be a little bit longer. and then your month or your annual meeting. This is again what we're talking about now. Really, this
do an overnight
full day. Yeah, for us, we're just going to give you the advice: do an overnight. Plan it for a day. Do an overnight. Have a date night. Don't go out and get hammered. Enjoy one another, and then review it again the next day. Make sure everything's aligned and make the final changes to it.
One thing that I like about the daily and weekly, because that's really where my mind goes to, is daily. I don't know how many arguments we've saved by discussing a few minutes in the morning and then maybe a few minutes at night just to prep, so we both know what's expected. Because otherwise, you just assume that someone checked the calendar. You just assume that we know we have conferences, which we missed this year, but just assume that the other person knows everything. And this is going to help decrease tension and increase communication. Okay, yeah, right. That's right. You told me you had a meeting this week. Okay, yeah, today you have this. It's going to eliminate some arguments. So take time to do that 5 to 15 minute planning every single day.
Yep. Yeah, it's key because one of your words for the year really was planning. It was discipline of really getting planning in. That's not one of Bree's strengths. So we've got to make this a critical time in our day to sit down and talk about each one of these things. And for us, I think this is maybe the first year, I should know that, but I feel like this is the first year we've really excelled at using a full-blown family calendar.
An online calendar.
Online calendar.
It's been a joke for a year that I like to go to Target every year and get my daily planner. And then guess what? I forget it, or I leave it at home, or and it's like, you don't know what's on there.
Yeah.
Update it on Google.
We use a Google Calendar, and we're combined. So we've got our family events. We've got color coordination with that. So whichever one of you has that as a strength, leverage it. And
set it up.
And don't be afraid that your spouse is trying to be big brother. Look over your shoulder, watch everything you're doing. Use it so that you can be successful.
The key is to update it.
Update it. Update it.
Yeah.
Put everything on it that needs to be on it for the family calendar. And it will be very, very impactful for you. And everybody will have a clear picture of what is scheduled for you for the year. So love that one. Putting out that plan is extremely important. This is also the time for you to be able to look at what's the budgeting planning practice look like? What's our daily, weekly, monthly check-in? So get all of those in there. And I would encourage people to look at finances at least once a month. I mean, just sit down and have the conversation. Where are we at? How are we doing? What do we need to pull back on? Where do we have some extra opportunity to spend or give, whatever that looks like for you? But you're never going to drift to a desired destination. If you want to build generational wealth for your family, you've got to make sure that you're putting the proper planning into place of what that looks like. So great time to sit down and have that conversation collectively as a couple, making sure that your goals are aligned and everybody knows where they're at, to be clear as kind.
Okay, number 6, spiritual practices.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So this is really, I mean, you know what it looks like for us, but I'll share with everybody that's listening. We really want to make sure that we're aligned, and we do that by getting in God's word. We want to make sure we're aligned with what God has, and we're really challenging one another throughout the full year of like, what does God have in store for you right now? And that can feel like we want to move that every single day. Like sometimes it doesn't meet our expectations, but it's really about praying into what does it look like for this year? Where are the areas where I want God to grow me? Where do I need to be refined? Where do I need to be sanctified? Where do I need to serve in this season? Where do I need to give more in this season? What is my overall heart position when I'm walking to church? And you can expect throughout a calendar year, this is going to change. It's going to be very, very cyclical throughout the year, just based on where you're at. Now, we want consistency with it. The goal would be, other than these huge ups and downs, they're just kind of a much more smooth growth that's up and to the right. But if we don't plan for it, we're never going to get there.
Yeah, and I think just recognizing it, it's like the gym. In January, I would say the first few weeks, the gym is packed. Everybody's like, no, we got to get back into it.
Yeah.
And then you feel that guilt. If you don't plan and have a plan in place, you feel that guilt and you're like, I'm just not going to go anymore. The same thing is with our faith. At the start of the year, I know in the past, I've been so excited to get in the daily or get in the word every single day. And if I miss a day, I don't have to feel guilt or shame, but I have to get right back into it.
Yep.
And so that's one thing that I know that it's going to be spiritually strengthening for me, just with my own peace of mind and my just strength, really. And then really, how can I become a better wife and a better mother? It's going to be because I'm getting in the word every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
getting back on track when you miss it.
just made me think of like what my prayer is every single day. And I share this with a lot of the guys that I work with of like, I've got 4 things that I really look at as it relates to overall faith. But number one, the filter that I run everything through is it making me a closer follower of Christ? Is it making me a better husband? Is it making me a better father? And is it making me a better leader? With those 4, I can usually start to figure out, okay, is this something I should say yes to or something that I need to say no to? Because if it's not making me a closer follower to Christ, man, it's out. Like that's the non-negotiable. Is it making me a better husband? Well, now I'm looking at what's the most important thing to me, the most important relationship to me on this side of heaven. Well, it's you, it's my bride. So I want to make sure that it's making me a better follower of Christ, making me a better husband. Is it making me a better father? A lot of times, like those are tough ones because you've got work schedules. I'm working with a guy right now who's really in this like tough spot mentally of like, man, I want to provide for my family extremely well, but I'm missing out on so much. So we've got to look at that and say, okay, how do I want to make sure that I'm setting our family up for long-term success? And then last but not least, is it making me a better leader in the workplace? So if it's met 3 out of those 4, then you've got to look at it and say, okay, what does this look like? This is when we're talking about these things with one another. What does the year look like for us, and how are we making sure that we're setting ourselves up spiritually to continue to grow, to be the best version of a husband, the best version of a father, and the best version of a leader, so that when we step outside of this meeting, we are equipped to win.
One thing I'd like to speak to the women again is if you have a desire for your husband to lead, this is a time where you can really build him up and really say, okay, like so many women don't want to have to lead their family, but then they are so quick to tear down their husbands in this area. And so this could be a time where you're like, okay, where have I personally fallen short this year? And I haven't let my husband lead. I've taken the reins and really encouraging him, because that's something that we've had to grow in. And I love being led by you.
Thanks,
even
babe.
if you, I mean, it's true. Even if you get it wrong here and there, which you're going to, even if I get it wrong here and there, I want to still come back to the table and say, okay, it's a spiritual goal for me to let you lead me.
Yep. And part of that is really moving into 7. How do you prepare for unexpected challenges that you're going to be faced with? Because it's life. It's going to come at you at 1,000 miles an hour. We're overstimulated, under-disciplined. We've got a lot of stuff going on in our lives. How are we going to equip one another and be self-equipped to battle anything that's coming into our lives that was unexpected? Whether that's a sickness, mental challenges, physical ailments, scheduling conflicts. What's it going to look like for you as a married couple to win those? Because that's really where it is. And there's going to be a lot more of those than you can plan for everything, but there's always going to be the unknown. So like expect the best, but prepare for the worst. And that's the same thing that takes place in marriage. So what's the conversation going to look like when unexpected things come at you? What's it going to look like for you guys to get back into that daily huddle to say, wait a minute, this is where we lost today.
Yeah, committing to that communication.
Yep. This is where we lost today. We lost this today. I failed you. I let you down. You let me down, but it's okay. I'm here with you. I want to stay committed to this. What do we need to do to make sure that we're not rattled by something of the outside world coming at us and attacking us again tomorrow? And we're learning through this process of what's working in our marriage so that we can double down on it and put all of our chips on the table and say, let's go play.
Yeah, I think of seasons where we didn't feel safe with each other. We didn't feel like we could come and share when something bad happened or negative happened, where we were shaken a little bit and where we fell short. And now we've just worked so hard to provide this safe environment where we're not going to shame, we're not going to blame, we're going to come, like we are a team.
Yep.
Scripture says that the enemy is, people say this, the enemy is the enemy. It's not your spouse, it's not your kids. And so having that safe place, I know for me, I'm way more apt to come to you with a concern if I feel like you're going to receive it. And that takes a lot of work.
It does. Yeah, we didn't get here overnight. This has been a consistent thing for us for about 8 or 9 years now, of implementing a lot of the strategies that we've shared with you, knowing that, yes, our desire was to get it perfect the first time. We didn't. We're always going to be growing and we're always going to be learning. And we want to make sure that we stay in that mindset of this doesn't have to be perfect, but let's do our best to prepare ourselves for the best.
Let's have the framework.
But let's be ready for anything that comes at us. So really, this is the way that we've done it. It's been extremely successful for us. We're going to continue to do it. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to learn. really bringing us to like final thoughts. This isn't just a planning meeting for us. This is an opportunity for us to connect on a really deep level, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. We're coming together to talk about what our goals are for the year. We're being vulnerable. We're sharing the things where we didn't perform well in the previous calendar year. We're talking about a lot of stuff that can really become a weapon that could be used against us later. So setting this up for goals is great, but the most important piece of it is that we're coming together to build a vision that our family can operate out of for that calendar year. And then knowing that when we're met with everything from the outside world, or we're met with something that didn't align with our plan, we've got a built-in cadence already to come back and discuss it. And it doesn't have to be something that derails us.
Yeah. And if you're listening saying, we could never do that, we'll never do that, I didn't think we'd ever be able to do that.
Right.
And again, I think you mentioned we didn't get it perfect at first. We've never gotten it perfect going through this, but the desire is there and the framework is there, and we can grow and grow together. The goal is unity. I don't want to go in, like people talk to us all the time. I just don't feel like he's there for me. She doesn't support me. This is a great opportunity to say, okay, we haven't gotten it right, but this is the year to do it. And then have grace when challenges come up and get right back on track.
Yeah, and you're always inviting God into that conversation, man. If you're comfortable with it, invite him into the conversation. It'll set you up for success. It alleviates so much of the pressure when we invite the Prince of Peace into the conversation.
That's right.
Before we engage in it. And we're constantly, we've got our Bibles open and we're really looking at this stuff through his word. Okay, does this align scripturally? Does this align with God's word? If the answer is yes, okay, let's pray about it and let's see if that's going to be something that sets us up for success. So another just piece that we didn't touch on, but the preparation leading into this is really an internal thing where you're spending some time alone, really starting to be tuned in to what God has in store for you as you prepare for this meeting, so that when you come together, you've got everything laid out and you're able to look at that previous year, say, I want to make sure we win this next year. So get all of your stuff out, get ready for it now. You've got some time, set it all out, start taking your notes, and we can't wait to hear from you on how impactful this has been for your marriage moving into the new year. It's an awesome time to connect. Remember, it's not just about the goals, but it's also about the connection with one another, meeting one another with grace, having patience with one another, learning from one another, so that you can go out and create a marriage that matters and build a legacy that will last.
New year, new us.
Cut.